Trump transition officials told reporters on a call today there would be a big announcement from Donald Trump.
I was just called by the head people at Sprint, and they're going to be bringing 5,000 jobs back to the United States. They're taking them from other countries. They're bringing them back to the United States. And Massa and some other people were very much involved in that, so I want to thank them. And also OneWeb, a new company, is going to be hiring 3,000 people, so that's very exciting.
Well, that was the announcement. No economic plan, no real details, no explanation of how this deal came about, which raises the question of whether it even is a new deal and whether Trump was involved in bringing the 5,000 jobs from Sprint to the U.S. and a new company named OneWorld delivering these 3,000 jobs. Now, Donald Trump isn't even in office yet, but he is pioneering a kind of a new type of government rollout for quite small business announcements. Consider it the PR version of corporate welfare. We'll tell you how it works. Trump makes an announcement, essentially on behalf of a specific company, about jobs for U.S. workers. He ensures then that he's not only in the headlines, but on the screen, since he, not the CEO, is literally releasing the news, and it draws coverage and allows him to take some kind of bow before any of the details are even known. Several weeks ago, Trump got to announce he said, was bringing $50 billion and 50,000 jobs into America from a deal with a Japanese company, SoftBank. But in actuality, reporters demolished those claims, revealing the investment was likely destined for the U.S. regardless of who was elected. In the case of Carrier, you may remember, Trump said he was saving, not adding, saving 800 jobs that were going to be moved to Mexico. And then, with further documentation, we learned Carrier was granted millions in tax breaks to keep a plant in Indiana by the state government there, the kind of deal Donald Trump had previously attacked politicians for. Plus, yes, folks, we're staying on the story. It turned out Carrier was still sending many of those plants' jobs to Mexico and shuttering a separate Indiana plant and sending those jobs to Mexico, too. Now, tonight, hours after Donald Trump was happy to announce those supposed 8,000 new jobs, again, some demolishment. We're learning these are not new jobs. They are the same jobs from that SoftBank announcement from earlier this month. This was just the president-elect repackaging an old announcement of jobs and trying to tell everyone they're new, like a hand-me-down stimulus. Consider for a moment that studies have estimated Obama's auto bailout saved 1.5 million jobs. We want to be clear here, so this chart is as clear as possible. That is your comparison, 1.5 million to the 800 in the Carrier deal. If Barack Obama was like Donald Trump right now and held individual announcements for every 800 jobs he saved, the size of that Carrier deal, he would have held one of these thank me press conferences every day for more than 5 years. Now, most presidents do have pretty strong self-esteem, but only Donald Trump has the rapper-level chutzpah to literally thank himself. Folks, he just channeled Aubrey Drake Graham to basically say, you could thank me now. Here's the tweet, quote, the U.S. Consumer Confidence Index for December surged nearly 4 points, the highest level in more than 15 years. Thanks, Donald, end quote. Thanks, Donald. The Consumer Confidence Index, of course, not exactly a pure economic metric. It doesn't rate the economy. It doesn't have anything to do with counting jobs or the markets. It's a poll about how people feel about the economy. Donald Trump taking credit for a 4-point bump in an economic feelings poll before he takes office. It's gone up, if you're keeping track, more than 80 points during President Obama's time in office. We're waiting on that thanks Barack tweet from the Barack Obama account. And it's not just the index. Donald Trump would also like you to thank him for some recent stock market activity. Quote, the world was gloomy before I won. There was no hope. It's like Star Wars tweets here. Now the market's up nearly 10% and Christmas spending over $1 trillion. Now we can report we don't think Donald Trump brought on the Christmas shopping. We think it was Christmas. But the markets have seen gains since the election. The Dow Jones is up, not a full 10%, but a little over 8% since November. And what you are looking at right now is not the recent gains in the Dow, though. That Dow gain there is a steady climb over the last 4 years under President Obama. Here's the portion that Donald Trump's taking credit for. And he hasn't taken office. So it's not about his policies. He's just showing up after somebody else built something and then trying to profit off their work or kind of slap his name on the side of someone else's building. Now that you think about it, maybe Donald Trump has unveiled his economic plan. It looks a lot like his business model. Joining us now is Jared Bernstein, Senior Fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and of course, former Chief Economic Advisor to Vice President Biden. So you are of this administration. We showed some of the numbers. The point there isn't really tit for tat. It's how small Donald Trump's tat is compared to this record, and yet he's obviously very happy with it.
Well, that's definitely a big part of the point. And I think it's really great that you're sticking with those stories. You know, I was reminded of this comedian I heard who once said, "I have the world's greatest collection of seashells. I keep them on beaches across the world." He's obviously making a lot of claims for a trend that he's inheriting, a trend that is obviously as different as the one Obama inherited as day versus the night. Now, I was there in the Oval Office when Obama made the decision to help rescue the auto industry, and let me tell you, there was a lot of pressure pushing against him. He made that call, and that bar chart you showed is accurate. So yes.
But did he go and make these weird announcements? I mean, this is a very different style here, where with a lot less, there's a lot more noise.
Well, yes, Donald Trump's noisiness is, if you had a bar chart of Donald Trump's noisiness relative to Obama's, you'd have the same kind of relative relationship there. So, look, I mean, I think on the stock market, there is an interesting thing going on there. There's a bit of a Trump bump in the market. Yeah. And you're right, it's part of a much longer-term trend. But part of what's going on there is an expectations game. Donald Trump is talking about cutting taxes significantly on high-income people. He's talking about deregulating financial markets. Now, if that sounds to you a lot like the George W. Bush 2000s agenda that got us into this mess in the first place, I agree with you. It sounds that way to me, too. And there's a very conspicuous absence between the kinds of policies he's espousing and the kinds of things that would actually help a lot of his constituents.
Right, and Wall Street's pricing in what they expect to happen that will help them, separate from Main Street. He ran very much against Wall Street, so we'll see where that goes. The other question's a little more economic metaphysical, but I want to ask you,
bring it.
Is there something wrong with someone with incoming power, a federal official, in this case the president, getting into this level of ad hoc, casual detail about which companies are going to do what while he oversees a federal government, regulatory approval of deals? Is there anything that concerns you about that? Or do you buy the argument from some Trump boosters that say, this is different, we need different?
No, I think there's something wrong with this in particular. What we often have, and this is just the way presidents will always be, is that if something good happens in the economy, the president's going to take credit for it. I don't care who he or she is. This is something different. We're seeing a level of kind of micromanagement and, you know, tweet shaming China around trade, that and the whole carrier play. That's not a systemic approach to the kinds of manufacturing job promises that Donald Trump made, and those kinds of interventions are very much at the level of micromanaging specific firms, and that I don't think that does end well, and it's not characteristic of that level of policy.
And letting them off the hook easy. If all a company has to do is go along with spin for jobs they've already made a deal on and let the government official do the announcement, right. Well, that's the easiest corporate welfare ever.
Well, exactly. So Donald Trump, like with the carrier thing, Donald Trump talks sticks, but somebody's handing out a $7 million carrot check there. So you also have to look very much at the details. So what we're not seeing is systemic economic policy that's truly targeted. It's at the many constituents who voted for him because they've been on the wrong side of globalization. They've been on the wrong side of inequality. They've experienced wage stagnation. Instead, what we're seeing is an infrastructure plan that's a gift to investors and more of that sort of thing.
Jared Bernstein, not tired of winning yet, I think it's fair to say. Thanks for being here this evening. We appreciate your time. Much more to come. Stay with us.